Hello and welcome to Films for the Very First Time. My name is Jordan. With me, as always, is Casey McGeorge.
Not saying it is Casey McGeorge. It's just someone who looks an awful lot like Casey McGeorge. How's it going, everybody?
It's going good, and we are dipping our toes into another TV show here that Casey is um, presenting to me here. Um, I'll talk about my history with the show in a bit, but Casey, tell everybody what we are talking about today.
Oh, we're gonna go back to my teenage dirtbag years here. Uh, when I was literally a teenager, uh, high school and everything, um, like my freshman year of high school. I'm gonna go back to 1993 and check out 3 episodes of the X-Files.
Yes, we're talking the X-Files here, which I had seen maybe bits and pieces of. So, if we're comparing it to the other TV shows we've watched, like Buffy, I had seen more Buffy than I had seen X-Files. Is kind of how I would say that. And
You,
even then I had seen like
you know what I might
yeah.
equate this to? When we watched The Office,
Mhm.
I was I knew of The Office. I'd seen plenty of memes, plenty of stuff,
Right, right.
clips here and there. Maybe I was in a hotel room at some point and watched part of an episode or something, but hadn't really sat down and watched full episodes of The Office. Like it had been something that was on my list. I just never got around to it.
Like I
Maybe
think
I'm
this is
thinking that
something.
might be the same thing for you with this. Like you knew of
Yeah,
it.
like I'd probably seen parts of it, like either flipping through channels or like my mom watching the X Files or
Yeah.
something, or
But you had
like
never sat down and like watched any of it. And then even
I
if
knew
you
them from The Simpsons. Like I think they make an appearance in The Simpsons, Mulder and
yes they
Scully.
do. Yes they
So I've
do.
seen them from there. I knew like references to the X Files, of course, but yeah, I had not seen, and so much so that like if people said Mulder and Scully, I couldn't have told you which one was which until very recently when I did find out that Mulder was
David
the
Duchovny.
man and
Yeah.
Scully was the girl. But like I had never, I would know their names, but I could have not told you who was who.
Okay. All right. So before we start on the show, right? What is your experience or exposure to the paranormal? So for me, it started on Wednesday nights in the late 80s and early 90s. Guy in a trench coat would come out of the fog every week with a great voice and tell us that we can help him solve some things with Robert Stack and Unsolved Mysteries, with one of, if not the greatest theme songs in all of television history, right? So back then, Robert Stack with that great booming voice of his would come out, and there were a lot of like murders and kidnappings or bank robberies on there. But every week, every couple of weeks, they would have like a thing about uh paranormal stuff and unexplained phenomena. That was where I first was introduced to Bigfoot. That was where I first heard of and was introduced to Travis Walton of Fire in the Sky or Fire in the Sky fame. The logger who had been abducted for a period of several days and then appeared several hundred miles away in Arizona. Um, I this is where I was first introduced to like the Loch Ness monster and Bigfoot. Saw the Patterson Gimli film and saw like the surgeon's photo, right, and other paranormal things. And it was intriguing because it wasn't like the theme song for the show was creepy, but it wasn't totally scary except the alien stuff. Watching this stuff late at night still freaks me the hell out because I'm always like I'm gonna get abducted. And it should just freaks me out. Like there's no other way for me to put it. But what was your first introduction to like paranormal or phenomenon or something?
I mean, probably similarly. I grew up watching Unsolved Mysteries. I was a '90s baby. So I probably caught it more on like reruns than live,
I was gonna
but
say you might have been too young to be watching Unsolved Mysteries at this point. Like,
oh
yep.
yeah, Unsolved Mysteries. Like like I grew up watching like Dateline and stuff too. Like my parents watched that kind of stuff, so I would watch that type of stuff. But
But also back then you didn't have many TVs in the house. You might have only had one, like in the living room, and a lot of times you had to watch what your parents were watching. So like
right,
if mom and dad put on Unsolved Mysteries on Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock on NBC, either you were going to your room and reading a book, or you were watching Unsolved Mysteries on
I
Wednesday
did have
nights
a
at eight
TV
o'clock.
in my room, but that was not when I was probably as young as what I'm thinking here. But it was um it may have been even the reruns. I feel like there'd be days where like I'm out sick from school and I'm just sitting watching like
Yeah, you.
Unsolved Mysteries on Lifetime or something,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, you can catch old episodes, and I think they even got like streaming channels and stuff dedicated to like those old Robert
Yes, they
Stack
do.
episodes.
And I recently, during COVID and stuff, that was kind of like my show I would have on while I'm, doing stuff around the house would be Unsolved Mysteries as I'm like, diving into it. But um so I love it too. I love the theme song. It's classic. It's awesome. But I like it more for the uh unsolved murders and the kidnappings and stuff like that. I usually tune out my mind, at least when it comes to the aliens and like the Bigfoot and all that kind of stuff, because ghosts, anytime there's a ghost episode, I don't believe in ghosts. So that is my thing too. I guess you would say I'm a Scully in that sense. I believe in aliens because I believe the chances of life being just on this planet in this grand universe is amazingly small. So I believe in aliens. I don't know if I believe that they've ever visited us, but I believe that there's life out there. I don't believe in ghosts. So that's kind of a sticking point with my wife and I. If she mentions someplace being haunted, I'm like, well, it's not because they don't exist. And then I don't believe in like Bigfoot and stuff. So when it comes to paranormal stuff, I'm not a believer. But what I'll say is I do enjoy media with that kind of stuff. Sci-fi, um, stuff like that. Like I can watch stuff with ghosts and enjoy it and think it works in the story of that world, but in my own world I do not believe in ghosts type of thing. So it doesn't turn me off from the shows if they have it in there, but in my own personal life I'm not a believer in the paranormal.
Unsolved Mysteries was the first time I heard about the Bermuda Triangle in Flight 19.
I
Like,
was just in the Bermuda Triangle actually.
I had heard the first time I heard about the Bermuda Triangle was because they did a thing on Flight 19, the squadron that disappeared, quote unquote, disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle, blah blah blah, like stuff like that. So, like, once I saw that, I was hooked. Once I saw Unsolved Mysteries had me hooked in general, and I think that was
Yeah.
kind of the beginning of my interest in like true crime as well, and the paranormal. And then 1992, 1993 comes along. I don't know how or where I came across the X Files, but I fell in love with it for three reasons. One, aliens and paranormal stuff had me hooked, right? Like, it was awesome. Two, I didn't really realize it at the time, but the writing and the way it was made was really good. The writing was really good for the most part. There's some that are not so good, and like the lighting and how they filmed it was fantastic. Three, I fell in love with Gillian Anderson as Dana Scully. Right? Um, I just did. I am not the only man in the world. I'm not the only person in the world who can say that. There are many people out there who realize what they like or what they love because of Gillian Anderson playing Special Agent Dana Scully. So, and then initially it came on Friday nights, right? And like I said, freshman, sophomore year of high school, didn't have a lot of friends, wasn't doing a lot of things. Those were my Friday nights. Like that's just what I do.
So that's a surprising thing for me in the sense of like it launched on a Friday as a hit because usually we think of Friday as like the death
Well,
slot,
it
right?
wasn't totally a hit its first couple years, and then it
Well, the
moved to
first season,
Sunday
yeah,
night.
was ranked 105, so
Like the first
not
year or
great.
two, it wasn't totally a hit, but it did gain a cult following, and then eventually when they moved it to Sundays, then it really exploded. So then
Yeah,
like my
seasons
son,
4, 5, and 6 were in the top 12 for viewership rank on TV. That means it went from 105 in season 1 to
to
rank
top 10.
11 by season 5 and then rank 7 by season 10, the new season that came out.
So all right. The X-Files is an American science fiction drama television series created by Chris Carter. Originally aired from September 93 to May 2002 on Fox. Uh, Originally had 9 seasons with 202 episodes. 10th season came out of 6 episodes in 2016, which I was psyched about and loved. Returned for an 11th season of 10 episodes, which ranged from January to March in 2018. Also had 2 feature films, X-Files, and X-Files I Want to Believe. Um, and then it had comics, it had art, it had trading cards, had a lot of stuff. The series revolves around Federal Bureau of Investigation Special Agents Fox Mulder, played by David Duchovny, and Dana Scully, played by Gillian Anderson, who investigate the eponymous X-Files. Marginalized, unsolved cases involved in paranormal phenomena. Mulder is a skilled criminal profiler. As you hear in the pilot episode, he went to Oxford. He was also part of the behavioral sciences unit, which was they recently did a show on Netflix, Mindhunter.
Mhm.
That's the people who started behavioral sciences unit were part of that's what that show is based on, and that's where criminal profiling came
Criminal
from.
Minds as well, right?
Uh,
That's one that's
Ardent
kind of based off that.
supernaturalist and a conspiracy theorist who believes in the existence of paranormal. Scully is a medical doctor and skeptic who's been assigned to analyze Mulder's case files. Um, Eventually, they become pawns in this overarching thing about a government conspiracy of alien human hybrids, and there's this whole thing. And to try and explain that would take several hours, and I'm not going to do that. Just say like a third of the episodes are part of like this whole myth arc thing, and you can actually on Hulu there's a tab specifically for those episodes. You can go online and search out which of those episodes that will help you understand the entire mythology of who and what is going on. The other 2/3 are just monsters of the week, singular villain, mutant, monster, whatever random crap. Um, so, uh, okay. Um, Carter was given the opportunity to produce new shows for Fox in the early 90s. He had previously worked on comedies for Walt Disney Pictures. Um, Report at the time said about 3.5 or 3.7 million Americans believe they may have been abducted by aliens. Uh, the Watergate scandal, the 70 horror series called Kolchak the Night Stalker contributed to trigger the idea for the X Files. He wrote the pilot in '92. Okay, so like you said, Mulder is the one who believes in extraterrestrial life and all this other stuff, and Scully is the skeptic. But in real life, it's actually just the opposite. David Duchovny is actually the skeptic, and Gillian Anderson does believe in some of these paranormal things. Quick note: during the opening title sequence, Mulder and Scully's badges read Federal Bureau of Justice, United States Department of Investigation. They have to make that alteration to make it necessary because even for a TV show, making a fake FBI badge, at least at one point, was illegal. I don't know if it still is, but that's one of those things. They take that one kind of seriously, so they have to make sure it's very distinct. That so like it can't fool the average person. Quick note, all the episodes that have something to do with aliens will start with a picture or a take of a starry night sky, which we will see in at least one of these episodes. Gillian Anderson in the show contributed to something called the Scully effect. Young women have chosen to join law enforcement and medicine as a result of their admiration for Scully all over the world. Anderson states she based her approach on Jodie Foster's performance as Clarice Starling in Silence of the Lambs. Now, she had a contractual obligation, Gillian Anderson, prohibiting her from playing an FBI agent in any other role, just like how I talked about one of the last times how the actors who play James Bond cannot wear a tuxedo, a full-up tuxedo in any other role, because it can even give the audience the impression that it's James Bond, and they want to separate from that. She was actually offered the part of Clarice in the Silence of the Lambs sequel, Hannibal, but she was unable to take it because she could not play an FBI agent. But she later joined the TV series Hannibal. As of a couple years ago, the series has never been out of syndication since it ended in 2002. It may still be the case. I don't know, although right now I'm not sure how syndication works because of streaming. I own a box set of like the first 9 seasons, but I watch this on Hulu. All right, so let's talk about the pilot, right? Original air date September 10th, 1993. An IMDb rating of 8.2 out of 10. 7.9 on IMDb, it received, a 7.9 rating television-wise, which equated to about 12 million viewers. Right now, if you had 12 million viewers, you would have the number one show on all of television.
Yeah, I was going to say these numbers, even when you said it wasn't a big hit, these numbers would kill nowadays. Like,
Yeah,
oh my
back then,
God.
I think it averaged around 10 million viewers its first season, and that ranked, would you say, 107th or something, 104th in television that year?
105th, yeah.
Right? And now, like, 10 million viewers, like, that would blow people's minds. Skeptical FBI agent Dana Catherine Scully is reassigned by her section chief to work with a believer Fox Mulder. Their first case together takes them to Bella Fleur, Oregon, where the 4th member of a high school class of 89 is now found dead with 2 mysterious pin marks on her back, which all the other victims had.
By the way, real quick, just want to tell you, this is still in syndication. I just went and looked. It's on Comet, one of those over the air broadcasting channels that you can get with an antenna. It's called Comet. Usually plays like sci-fi stuff. I just looked it up. The episode that would be on Comet today, they play 4 episodes today. Seasons 5, episodes 7 through 9 today. So still going on syndication.
Okay, so as of 2025, Super Bowl Sunday in 2025, it's still in syndication. That honestly, that's a hell of a run right there. Because usually, whether it's just contractually or whatever, like things will run out of syndication for a year or two, and then eventually they may pop back up. Or people have their issues and get involved in some sort of scandal, and then they have to take it off of syndication.
Cosby.
I was gonna say the Cosby Show and Fat Albert are really good examples of that. And then that unfortunately hurts other people involved with the show because they can't get those residuals from the show. So another quick note. Initially, network executives wanted a taller, leggier, blonder, and breastier actress for the role of Dana Scully. At some point in pre-production, Pamela Anderson was attached to the role. But Chris Carter wanted a more cerebral character instead of a more physical one, and he flat out was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. When auditions were held, Anderson was one of the actresses. Carter lobbied for her to be picked, It even went so far as he was talking to her in secret to give her tips on how to get the part, which she eventually did get the part. Ironically, in 1996, Gillian Anderson was voted FHM Magazine's Sexiest Woman in the World, while Pamela Anderson was number 10. Also, another note, Gillian Anderson is not a natural redhead. She dyed her hair for this role. She's a natural blonde. But she's more, most people know her more for her red hair, for her part in the X-Files. So what did you think, what did you think of the first, okay, you don't see it in this episode, but what do you think of like the cold opens that we get for the other two episodes, like cold opens and the
Mm-hmm.
theme song and the credits of the X
Um, so cold open wise, it feels very similar to shows that have, of course, been inspired by this, right? Like, if there are like two shows that I would say that I watched that feel very similar to the X Files and was clearly inspired by the X Files, would be Smallville, the young Superman show that was on WB and CW. They have Freak of the Week episodes where the next person is, gets powers and whatever. And then you also have your mythology based episodes that deal with the Superman mythos and the overarching plot. And then Fringe. Fringe is probably the darn closest you're going to get to X Files, I would say. Very similar, dealing with paranormal stuff. And the cold opens feel very, I would say, familiar to me in that regard, where you get like a little, almost like any procedural, really, where you get like a little hint of what it's going to be about, right? And then you kind of see something happen, and then boom, title
Files.
card
2 to 3 minutes, the
theme
murder
song. Right,
happens, whoever disappears, whatever's going
right.
on, and then you get your credits. What'd you think of the
And
theme song? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
the theme song, I think I've heard it before. The credits, I felt very 90s. Like, the fonts are very basic. They're not very, like, I would think if you were doing this nowadays they would just put a title card that says X Files, and that'd be it. Because
Yeah,
nobody does theme songs, nobody
be
does
like 8 seconds or
nice
something.
intros. But I think if you were doing it in the early 2010s, you may get like more like uh, a different type of font style. So I guess I was pretty surprised by like the fonts looking pretty basic, like the uh what does it end on there? It says like I want to believe, right? Or something like that.
The truth is out there.
Truth is out there, right? It's just very big normal Arial font or something. So that was kind of surprising, but like the actual like substance of those, I like seeing like the badges, like the um when it instead of just showing like the character doing something
Some
with the
pose
name
or
underneath of it,
yeah.
it is like their almost like found footage type thing. I like the way that they kind of do the intro like that.
Okay, so a couple things. One, they kind of did a found footage episode. They did a crossover with Cops.
Oh, did they
Uh,
really?
yeah, they did a crossover with Cops in one of the seasons, which was awesome. Two, the title card at the end that says "The truth is out there." They did change it up for some of the episodes.
I
Um,
was just reading that. Yeah.
One of the mythology things at the end of season 2 deals with the fact that there were some alien bodies on Navajo land or whatever, and Chris Carter got translated "The truth is out there" into Navajo, and then they've had a few other things or other quotes, but for the most part, "The truth is out there." They didn't really change much of the credits until David Duchovny left in like season 6 or 7.
Yeah, so I was reading that. Did he actually leave? Because it says like he's an intermittent lead for some of the episodes. Like, is
Yeah, he
that?
was still there, and then he did leave for sure. And then Robert Patrick took over as not as Fox Mulder, but took Mulder's place. It was another agent. Then Gillian Anderson left a little while later, and there was another young lady that took her place, and then they came back for the finale and stuff.
Really? She left?
Yeah,
Oh, it says she's there for all 11 seasons, so she just left like during the middle of one.
She was maybe she popped in and out, but like I don't think she appeared in. Which I know for a fact she didn't appear in every single episode. Because there's definitely some
Oh,
season
okay.
one. There's for sure some season one episodes because initially during the beginning of season one she got pregnant, and they worked around that where this whole thing where she was in a coma or something. She came back to work like 2 or 3 weeks later, but when they started filming her, like they just filmed her like laying down, so she didn't have to do much or anything.
Mm.
Um, but yes, we got teenagers disappearing, weird things happening, right? Some place in the middle of Oregon. We get uh, we get Mulder and Scully's first initial interactions with each other, where Sculder's working in the basement of the FBI, which also goes back to the behavioral sciences unit. Was initially when they first started, they were working in the basement of the FBI. Obviously, we start to see Scully's the skeptic. She's not really doesn't believe in this stuff. Um, so, like you said, this is a '90s ass show. We get big cell phones. We get big
Hmm.
suits with big shoulder pads, right? Um, we you can look back now and you definitely get big cars and rental cars because they travel a lot in this show. Like their work takes them to all these other random places, so they're always on the go, and they're always like the title car, or card will say like Phoenix, Arizona, someplace in Michigan, Oklahoma, wherever. They're always all over the place, so they're always getting weird, different, random rental cars, but they're nothing like the cars we have nowadays, right? So yeah, like kids disappearing, somebody dies, they go to a town, they're not necessarily welcomed there by like the local sheriff and things. That's something that can happen in some episodes. Some episodes they work well with the police, the local police forces. Like this one, they really don't. There's other reasons behind that. Um, I, I, this episode was more because, like I said, we learned our lesson with The Office, and then for sure Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Like watching the pilot, not watching the pilot, so you know who is who and what's what, kind of messes things up later on when you go seasons. So, not I really don't want to get too much into this one. I will say, do you remember the end of the episode? Um, After Scully goes in and she's talking to her bosses and giving them the report that she had, right? She walks past a rather tall man who walked into
Yeah, the
that same room.
cigarette smoking guy.
Yeah, that's
I've heard of him before.
played by William B. Davis. He's known as a cigarette smoking man, cancer man. He initially wasn't supposed to have a really big part. He was only supposed to be in like a few episodes, be somewhere in the background. Fans gravitated towards him, and then he became like the head of this conspiracy. But he's really not, because he actually, as you start getting into other seasons, as far as like at the FBI level or that level in DC, he's like up at the top of that conspiracy. But then once you get to like this global conspiracy, he's like way down here where he has to report to other people, and he's
Right.
like low on the totem pole. So he's like a big fish in a small pond here, but then you put him in a bigger pond, and he's just like a guppy in a bigger pond or whatever. So yeah, he definitely plays. He does that job. He does that part well. Um, there's a line he says, "I've watched presidents die." Obviously, talking about the power he's had. Um, but he still does not. He can't do everything. So what did you think initially of the getting to know the characters in the first episode, just to kind of get the gist of what's going
It was definitely helpful. So it was good that we did the pilot, right? Because, like I said, I wouldn't have been able to tell you who was the believer, who was the skeptic. I wouldn't have been able to tell you any of that until I watched this episode. Um, so that helped setting it, and then also just kind of having a good jumping on point of knowing, um, like that Scully was there to kind of what the FBI is thinking is watch over his cases, right? Because they don't really believe the stuff that seems to be going on is kind of how it seems to be phrased, right? And when she gives her report at the end here, they're like, "Well, do you actually have like proof of this stuff? This is all kind of far fetched." And she does have like the implant, right, from Billy's brain, which the cigarette smoking man takes to match with other ones that they have. So that type of thing was, I think, needed to be able to give me the background. So that way, these next two episodes, I kind of understood more where we were going in character relationships.
So there's a couple more tropes that start in this episode. One is Scully is always coming in right after whatever big thing that Mulder sees is gone. So like this one, she gets tripped or whatever, and whatever it was that the bright light and whatever it was that Mulder saw with the young man and she pops up right after when it's gone. That's a running thing that happens a lot during the series, right? Also, Mulder losing his gun, his gun falling out or whatever. So much so that in one of the episodes in season 3, he was chasing somebody, his gun gets knocked away, right? And then he pulls out another one and he says something about, I got tired of losing my gun. Because this show came out really around the birth of the internet. So there were a lot of message boards and there were a lot of people who really were into this show. And there were theories and there were random other things people were talking about. And come to find out, people from the show were scouring these message boards for like ideas and things that fans were thinking. And I'm not saying it had a direct influence on a lot of things, but there were nuggets, and people who've worked on the show have talked about, yeah, we scoured the message boards and we looked at different things and we pulled information or things that people didn't like or weren't feeling, and that kind of helped some of their, as the show went on, it kind of helped some of what they were doing. But yeah, the pilot's just the pilot, just like with anything else. It's just, you're kind of getting to know people and going off from there. Our next episode, season 3, episode 4, Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose. The original air date of October 13th, 1995. A few days after my birthday. IMDb rating, 9.2 out of 10. Received a 10.2 rating. 15.38 million people watched this episode. This one had a guest star of Peter Boyle. Boyle plays a grumpy old man with psychic powers, who's also an insurance salesman. His psychic powers show him how someone will die, and he's assisting the agents with the hunt for a crazy serial killer who's targeting psychics. He also reveals to Mulder and Scully how they each die. Now, one thing with this show as well, you will see a lot of people before they made it big. Now, Peter Boyle, this was before Everybody Loves Raymond, but he was also an established actor at this time. I actually am on the episode after the next one. I'm on, in my rewatch now, I'm on episode 3, season 21. So far, I have seen Felicity Huffman. I've seen Peter Boyle.
You mean episode 21 of season 3?
Yes.
You said episode 3 of season 21. I was like, holy shit.
No, the other one. Yeah, season 3, episode 21. So far, I have seen Felicity Huffman in an episode before she was big. I have seen Jack Black. I've seen Giovanni Ribisi. I've seen Lucy Liu. I have seen a very young Deadpool himself, Ryan Reynolds.
Wow.
Was in an episode of the X-Files. This episode won the show its first 2 Emmys. Outstanding guest actor in a drama series by Peter Boyle, and outstanding writing for a drama series. Let's see. We got the cold open, and we see the our serial killer kill somebody. We get to the credits and things. I would guess you're probably not a believer in psychics or whatever either, are you?
No.
What did you think of the stupendous Yappy?
Yeah, this guy annoyed me. He's the usual um blowhard, I would say, of these like TV psychics that you would see that they don't really exist anymore, but like you would see ads for them where it'd be like, call me now and
Miss
we'll tell you
Cleo.
your yes. Yeah. So I don't know. I love when Mulder's kind of it's funny because Mulder is a believer in this type of stuff, right? But like he is the one that when this guy's introduced and the other cops are kind of fawning over him, is
He
like,
knows right
look,
away
he's just yeah.
this guy's full of bullshit. Like
I bet he said this and that because it can be interpreted as this and that type of thing, right? Like he's able to see through it. I love the way that they open this up too, where I feel like you're supposed to think they're talking about Mulder and Scully, at least Mulder, right? Where
yeah,
the cops are like, "Oh, this guy, he's
he's
coming in.
weird.
He's going to help us. He's
He
blah
had
blah
the
blah."
nickname Mulder actually had the nickname Spooky. I think it was brought up in the pilot. And
Yes,
they
yeah,
bring that up here as well. Like this guy's kind of spooky, and then he walks in. So yeah, the same thing. You're thinking, oh, they're talking
yep.
about Mulder. It's really not.
And they're like, "Oh no, we got these guys."
Who the hell is
And
this
then
guy?
the
Yeah, who are
Yappy
you?
comes
Who
in.
the hell are you? Um. So yeah, I remember the 900 number craze back in the day. Yeah, I've called a few 900 numbers myself. The parents were not too happy about that. Those things get expensive after a while.
What did they tell you?
I honestly can't remember. Dude. This was like almost 40 years ago. I couldn't get anything on that. So yeah, in case anybody hasn't watched this, there's a guy who's at a someone who reads tea leaves. He's asking her like, why is he going to do the things he does? And he ends up killing her, but not before like her accent or whatever. Once he starts hurting her, her accent and stuff goes straight out the window. Right? He kills her. We get the cops. They're talking with each other. Excuse me, like you said, we get the impression they're talking about Mulder and Scully. Mulder and Scully come in, right, and then a TV psychic, the stupendous Yappy, who's got paparazzi following him and stuff. And like even the stuff he says, he's like, "Oh, he's a white guy. He may have he has a beard, but he may not. I think he has a tattoo somewhere on his body. Maybe the tattoo has a beard." And it's just like, come on, dude. And the cops just eat it up.
Call it
But
hedging your bets here.
it gets so bad where he kicks Mulder out of the room because he's like, you're giving bad energy. And the cops even allow it. They're like, and it's just like, come on. Yappy leaves. He says something to Mulder. And Mulder, I love the whole thing of Mulder's like, can you tell me what I'm thinking now? And I'm
Yeah.
basically like that's a GFY moment right there. He's probably thinking, and I don't think it would have been too hard to figure out what he's saying to him right there. So here's a thought. What did you think of the chemistry between Mulder and Scully during these 3 episodes that you watched?
Like I know at some point they become romantically involved, but I
It's
don't
not
think.
till way late in the series. I'm
Okay, I was
talking
gonna
like
say
way down the road.
they don't have that vibe yet, but they definitely seemed more like a team in this episode and the next one than they did in like the pilot, right? Like they seem like they've been obviously they've been doing this for a bit by now.
So the actors, Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny, are really, really good friends in real life. So much so that there's scuttlebutt and people believe that they may have had some things going on at some point. One of at the Emmys one year when Gillian Anderson won an Emmy, the first person she kissed and thanked was David Duchovny and not her husband. Um, she was holding hands with David Duchovny all throughout the Emmys one year, right? Um, I don't know. Now, the two of them admit they got to a point where they really didn't like each other filming the series. But that's partially because they were working up in Vancouver. There's long days. As you see, a lot of these shoots are done at night, and in a lot of them, they may have some weather, so there's rain, weather. Plus, as you know, with all the TV and stuff you watch, the weather in Vancouver is not that great a lot. So it can get cold pretty easily. It can rain pretty easy. So it can make for some miserable filming conditions for a lot of people. A lot of people who go to work up there say they do love Vancouver, right? They love the people, they love the area. The filming there is great, but it's just the weather a lot of times because it can get real gloomy. It's in the Pacific Northwest, so like it can just
Right.
get gloomy, cold, rain. It can wear on people. Even little things like in this episode where like she leans into him and is like, after he got kicked out by the stupendous Yabby, he's like, I can't take you anywhere. Like just little stuff like that is just awesomeness. You know, this our killer here is still killing people. They come across Clyde Bruckman, who has a unique ability that he can see how people are going to die. Jordan, if someone could tell you and you knew how you were going to die and possibly when, would you want to know?
No, I don't think so. One, because of this. So when Clive is being watched over by the other agent, right? He asks him this question pretty much, and he says, "Is it lung cancer?" He's like, "No." He's like, "Oh, thank God." No, it's something right around the corner. Actually, it's like
You
five
got about
minutes
two and a half.
later.
You got about 2.5 minutes left, guys. So yeah, lung cancer is not going to be what gets you.
Yeah, but it's like for him, he's thinking because I'm a smoker, that's his biggest thing of like, oh, it's gonna kill me. No, this other thing is gonna. This person's gonna kill you in like 5 minutes,
The guy with the
and
knife is going to kill you here soon.
that's the thing is I think you'd rather be blissfully unaware at times than like if somebody told you that like tomorrow you are going to
Well, so
die.
Clyde brings this up himself when he's talking, I think, with Mulder, where he's like, okay, maybe what I do causes something else, and like the way he explains is like, what if he causes what he does causes someone who invents a time machine to be born or not born, and then they go back and like you get that whole grandfather paradox thing, right? Where all of a sudden, like now I'm not here, right? And that could be an issue.
And for him,
There's
that's what makes him actually do it, right? He says it could result in me not being born. He's like, all right, let's do this.
Well, I think because if you notice when he starts getting these visions or whatever he has, he kind of like goes into this little trance,
Mm-hmm.
and then like he just pops right out of it, like it just like it didn't happen. Um, so part of me wouldn't want to know, but part of me does because I like
You'd want to
maybe I
make the
can't.
most of your time.
Yeah, maybe I can't change the future. Maybe I can't. Like obviously, I know I can't stop myself from dying. Right? I'm not Scully. I'm not immortal. We'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, to know what time I have, like yeah, to better live my life, knowing what I have is one thing, right? So I don't know. I mean, unless it was gonna be like okay, say with that one dude, the when we first see him, where he's talking to, well, not the first time we see him, because he's in a grocery store or a local convenience store. The next time we see him, where he's talking to that couple, and the guy's he's trying to explain to him life insurance. It's got $200,000 policy, and he's like, "But we're trying to buy a boat. It's a nice boat." And Peter Boyle is so good because he's like, "You just don't get it, do you?" And then
Right.
like he
You're
goes
gonna
in that
die like
train
what in 2 years or something, right?
years from now, you're driving down, you're trying to get home to your wife and baby, and you're on Highway 17 or whatever, and you're hitting a head-on collision by someone in a red Ford Taurus or whatever. He says, like, dude, okay, like that kind of sucks, but okay, and I got 2 years. Maybe I'm pretty sure I'd probably do a bunch of stuff trying to change that as that time got closer, but I don't know. Peter Boyle is
But
so good in this.
he's using like his powers for good as best as he can here too by like selling a life insurance. But he's trying to get these people to buy a life insurance policy, and he knows that they're going to die, and actually that his wife and kid would need this life insurance policy, right? So
Yeah,
like it is a helpful thing. He's not really using it against for like nefarious purposes.
yeah. Um, and you can tell he doesn't like that he has this power either. Like he's not someone who, not that he needs to appreciate it, but he doesn't appreciate it. He doesn't like it. He doesn't enjoy doing this, right? You can tell it really bothers him that he gets, because I mean, it doesn't show what he sees, right? But so I don't know if he just, and they never explain it, but you don't know if he's seeing how the person dies, if he's seeing it through that person's eyes and dying all these other times. But that's got to be pretty traumatic, like over and over and over again to do this all the time, right? Like that's got to suck.
There's actually a Smallville episode that's very similar to this, where there is so the way that show works is it takes place in Smallville. If people don't know Superman, that's where he's from. Has grown up as Clark Kent, and because of the meteor shower from his ship landing here, it leaves kryptonite throughout the city, throughout the town, and it has effects on different people through different ways. So it kind of can create these what they call meteor freaks. And there's an episode where one of them has the ability to see people's end by touching them. So very similar to where he says Mulder, I mean not Mulder, Scully is he doesn't see an end for her. There's a kid that touches Clark, and because Superman is usually an immortal being, there are some interpretations where he either ages slower or he doesn't age at all after a certain point and would live forever. He doesn't ever see Clark's end, and he sees instead like the red cape with the S on the back, like flapping in the wind as he's flying, and he's like, it's like one of the only times he feels something good when he touches somebody, and it like is that imagine just like whoever you touched or whoever you're interacting with, like Peter Boyle's character here, you just see death, how much that has to weigh on you when you're just trying to live your life.
Yeah. So this episode touches on a couple things. One, uh, how Mulder dies, right? Um, Throughout the course of the show, it's never directly shown, but it's been stated and we get hints that Mulder is a fan of adult erotica, right? There's been like he's talking about, he gets a camera hooked up to him at one point. He's like, "Can I get the Playboy channel?" He's got some. There's been quotes about magazines in his desk, or like um Scully's made jokes about like videos he's watching. Like one time there was something about a video tape left in the VCR, and he's like, "It's not mine." And then there was another time she walked in the office and he's watching a video, and she makes a comment of like, "Oh, this isn't what you usually are watching, right?" Um, Mulder enjoys some adult material. He's he's an adult. He can do that, right? Um, Peter Boyle character, Clyde Bruckman, it's hilarious because he's like, it's not my business, but he's like, I can't find a more undignified way to go than autoerotic asphyxiation. Mother's like, what are you telling me for? Never mind. Don't worry about it. And yeah, so we basically get that that's how Mulder at some point is going to die. He's there with Scully at one point, and he asks her if she would like to know. And at first she's like, no, but it's a shift change. And then before she goes, she's like, okay, how do I go? It's so perfect because he's like, you don't get it. You don't. And that's been, fans went crazy over that for a while, right? But it's been confirmed as canon by series creator Chris Carter that Scully is immortal. She doesn't die. And they play on that in a couple other episodes later, including one in one of the revivals where they make fun at it, where something was happening and Mulder's like, "Why didn't you wait for backup or whatever?" And she's like, "Don't you remember? I'm immortal."
So do they
So
ever actually explain that, or is it just like a thing?
there is an episode later where that is touched on, and if I remember correctly, it's something about there's a guy who sees death. Let me see. I think I have a note on there. I looked it up earlier because I watched these episodes earlier, right before I got on here. But there's an episode in one of the things where basically there's a guy who can't die, and he's been trying to die, but he can't. And like, I think the monster of the week that is like, if you look at death, that's how you die. Somehow he swaps out, and Scully looks away, and he's able to look at death, and then that's how that guy dies, and Scully ends up taking over his power or something. So
Okay.
it is touched on later in the series, and I can't remember, and I'm probably mixing that up horribly. But yeah, like it's been confirmed, like I said, from series creator Chris Carter that yeah, the Dana Scully is immortal, and fans love it because then there's people like me who are like, yeah, she needs to live forever. Gillian Anderson needs to live as forever and ever. So yeah, and for a while they think Clyde Bruckman is the killer because he knows things that like where bodies are going to be kept, right? And or he ends up telling them where bodies are going to be found, and it's when he puts it. They think like, well, the only way someone's going to know that is if he's the killer. But this is where we get the Mulder and Scully dynamic of Mulder believes it and believes that he can see people's deaths. Scully not so much. Um, Another great scene. They're going out to the woods because he tells them they're going to find a body there. They don't find a body, but they get stuck in the mud. They're trying to push the car out, so Scully's driving the car. The two men are behind the car. Looks like a big Lincoln Town car or something. They're trying to push in the mud from the back. They get a bunch of mud on Mulder's suit pants, right? And cuts to a shot of Clyde there, and he's got this weird smile on his face. He's like, "Oh, I'm glad I can bring you some joy." He's like, "I'm not smiling, I'm grimacing," and it's because they've been on top, literally been on top of the body the entire
Mm.
time. So yeah, you can tell like he doesn't enjoy this. Our killer actually ends up popping up at almost every crime scene, right? Where Scully's looking out and she doesn't realize it, but she sees the killer. He's there. Um, and then kills another psychic. They swap out with another FBI agent. It was the one we talked about earlier who thinks he's going to die of lung cancer. Doesn't know he has a minute, 57 seconds left to live. Tells him, like, don't open the door, right? So, of course, 10 seconds later, what happens? Someone knocks on the door. Clyde opens it. It's our killer, right? And it's, just one of those things. He's like, they brought you right to me. Like, he works as a bellboy in a hotel.
Yeah.
Like, nobody knew. They put Clyde in a hotel to keep him safe, right? And, it's just great. Once again, Peter Boyle's great because he's like, why am I doing the things I do? And he's like, you don't get it? You don't understand? You're a homicidal maniac. Like, you didn't try to give him some great explanation. He's like, no, you're just fucking crazy. Like,
Right.
there's no explanation for that. He's like, no, you don't kill me here. Like, you know.
It's
But he
like, why
does.
not? I don't know yet.
Dude, I don't make the rules. This is just what happens. It's not in the script. But through a break in the case, Scully recognizes something and realizes where a piece of evidence she finds and realizes who the killer is, right? They go back to the hotel. They find our agent with a cigarette still burning next to his body. He's dead. We don't see Clyde yet again, but everything he said to Mulder about the killer tracking Mulder down is pretty much spot on. Scully saves the day, shoots the guy. Guy's dead. They go back to Clyde Bruckman's apartment, and what he said, something he said to Scully, is true. They were going to end up in bed together. She's going to be holding his hand tenderly and gently. They're going to be having like this moment. And you can kind of understand why, but Scully initially, when she hears this, thinks the guy's like, "Yeah, we're gonna sleep together,"
Yeah, like a
and like,
pervert type thing.
yeah, and she's great because she's just like, "Sir, there are hits, there are misses, and then there are misses." But once this happens and she's holding his hand, she gets really emotional because like she realizes like, oh god, like everything he said is literally true. Unfortunately, Clyde took his own life because he just couldn't deal with doing this anymore. So some other notes about this episode. Uh, like I said, this is listed as one of, if not the best episode of the series. Um, Rolling Stone put it at number one in an article. The X-Files every episode ranked from worst to best. Called it heartbreaking, a masterpiece in television perfection. At one point, TV Guide called it the 10th graded episode in television history. IGN named it the best standalone X-Files episode of the entire series. In just 44 minutes, Boyle creates a fully formed character who makes a big impact in his one and only appearance. What else do we got here? 2016, Ira Madison of Vulture.com named it the best episode of the series and one of the best episodes of television ever, saying the episode takes every element that makes the series so iconic and throws them all into one heartbreaking install. On IMDb, it is the highest rated episode. Like I said, it's got a 9.2. Originally, Clyde Bruckman was written for Bob Newhart, but they couldn't get him for whatever reason, so we got Peter Boyle.
I could see that as well. Like I could see Newhart playing this.
Maybe, but I don't like. This is one of those. It could have worked, and it could have been probably just as good in a different way because I'm sure Bob Newhart would have put his own little spin on it in some way. But I can't see anybody else other than Peter Boyle playing that role. It's so good. And I talked about this during our Casino Royale. There's a scene where Bruckman's playing cards with Scully. Camera shows his cards. He's got two black aces and ace of hearts, two black eights. It's a variation of what is called the dead man's hand that I was correct at the time. Wild Bill Hickok was holding when he was shot in the back of the head in 1876 while playing poker. Hickok had two black aces and two black eights. So that is known as the dead man's hand. One of my favorite episodes of the series, and I think it is probably one of the best episodes of television I think I've ever seen. It really is good. And it's heartbreaking. I did get a little emotional at the very end of it there. And then we get an outro by the stupendous Yappy with his 900 number. And Scully throws the phone at the TV, which is awesome. Which you could have only done back then because TVs were humongous and weighed like 200 pounds. Right. And not even cell phones, cordless phones were also monstrous in size. So you could throw it at somebody or something and not break it. If you did that nowadays, you would destroy both your iPhone and your flat screen television, and you'd be out thousands of dollars.
It'd be tough to do it too. For a lot of people, watch TV on their phone, so they would see it on their phone and be like, "Ah!"
or their iPad or something like that. Anything else you want to add about Clyde Bruckman's final repose?
I think one thing that really works for these type of episodes that deal with procrastinators, right? Like people that can see the future, fortune tellers, things like that, are when you get those hints to what is to come either later in a season or in a episode. So, when they tell us when he tells Mulder uh, about like seeing him in the kitchen and stepping in the pie and stuff. It's those type of things that as a viewer you're making note of in your mind, so when it comes back around it feels very fulfilling when you get around to that. And we kind of dealt with that a little bit when we covered Agatha All Along over on our Marvel podcast, because we're dealing with um like Lilia, who was able to see the future, and there was hints to that type of stuff, and then it pays off in her episode when we see that stuff coming true. Or she even says, hey, when they say this, hit the deck, and we see that in the finale. It's those type of things that I think really work when we talk about like fortune tellers and things like that. While I don't personally believe in them in my real life, I think it really sets up cool stuff in fiction when you're able to kind of put little markers down, that we come back to later in an episode or later in a season and later in a show.
All right. So our final episode today is also one of the best episodes of the series. Season 3, episode 20. Jose Chung's From Outerspace. The original air date of April 12th, 1996. This episode is almost 30 years old, right? I've watched this episode, I can't count how many times. And it wasn't until the last time I watched it that I realized the episode title is about like I got the name of the episode, right? Jose Chung's From Outerspace. But that the title is basically Jose Chung, his book From Outerspace. It wasn't until the very last time that I watched it where I was like, oh, this makes a lot more sense now. Like it never hit me until the last time I watched it, like a couple weeks ago. On IMDb, this has an 8.8 out of 10. This received a 10.5 rating with 16.08 million viewers. So yeah, this one centers on Mulder and Scully. They're working on an alien abduction case, and there's an author by the name of Jose Chung who's writing a book about the incident. And this episode is a very comedic episode, and it also deals with how something can happen but can be seen from different perspectives, and everyone can have a different point of view of what happened. And that's something that Jose Chung in this episode talks about, of how everyone who he's talked to has different memories of all these different encounters, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, as I said earlier, episodes that deal with aliens usually start with a starry night, and we get that in this episode. Did you get any other vibes off of the cold open as well? Did something look familiar or feel like I've seen this before, but
not. I mean, I would say like a typical, like if you're gonna go with unsolved mysteries type of thing, where they'll talk about, it's usually two teenagers or somebody that would be going out doing something that then ends up getting abducted. The thing that really threw me is then when the alien starts speaking English and asks this question about the other alien, like that the same thing that the kids asked in the car, thought that was funny. But no, it just feels like a normal, I would say, like UFO plot.
how about it? How about if I told you there was a tribute to Star Wars Episode 4 in this episode?
Really?
The opening shot, the bottom of the cherry picker.
Like the
as you see the Star Destroyer, like
okay.
as you see like the bottom of the Star Destroyer
Chasing the ship at the beginning of the fourth movie.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Jose Chung is also based on Truman Capote. So, this We'll get to that later. But I told you that there was a. I told you last time that there was a cameo
Oh
in an
yeah,
episode that you never would have guessed. I think I could have given you like 10,000 guesses, and you never would have guessed the
Trebek.
cameo appearance in this episode. Yeah, like I don't think that ever would have popped in your head.
No, probably not.
And I mean, I could have given you guesses like until the end of time. Um, so we get, like I said, we get start. We get a guy in the cherry picker. He's doing his thing, working on power lines. Get some teenagers driving. The guy's really in love with the girl, but the girl's like, we haven't known each other that long.
It's their first date.
Yeah. All of a sudden, they lose power in the car. The bright light, alien abduction. A couple aliens come out, right? They start dragging the kid away, but then there's another alien, bigger alien that they do some stop motion stuff with. I don't know. Eventually, we meet Jose Chung, who's talking with Scully about. He's writing a book about this whole incident and what's going on. They do something similar to this in another episode down the road, where it plays on different people's perspectives. So in that episode, Mulder and Scully go to this other small town. They have different views of what happened. So like, there's a sheriff there who's played by who was the guy in Loki with the blonde hair, not Owen Wilson, his brother.
Oh, Luke Wilson.
Yeah, so Luke Wilson plays a sheriff. Luke Wilson was another dude, another person who was in episode of the X Files before he made it really big. Luke Wilson plays the sheriff. When Scully is talking about Luke Wilson as the sheriff, it's kind of hot. He's smoldering. I mean, let's be realistic. Luke Wilson's a pretty good looking dude, right? So, but he's kind of got a smoldering thing going, and he's very attractive. When Mulder describes him, he's like a local yokel sheriff. He's got buck teeth, and you know, like so. It's nowhere near what Scully remembers. But this is also later when they started playing with the romantic tension between the two of them. So there are certain things that they play with as the series goes along. Like there was an episode I watched where there was a cockroach episode, where Mulder meets a entomologist named Bambi something, and all Scully can get he's trying to explain this to her, and she's like, "Wait a minute, her name is Bambi." He's like, "Yeah," and then he keeps going. And he's like, "No, wait a minute, her name is Bambi." And like she starts showing some sort of signs of jealousy because Mulder is around another woman, right? And and then there's another so they start as you get into season 3 and later they start playing with their romantic tension a little more, and you can kind of tell there's some jealousy about them being around other members of the opposite sex. But nobody here remembers anything pretty much the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I love when they're talking about the sheriff. He obviously uses a lot of expletive language. Scully it also airs on Fox.
Right.
So you get a lot of, here's your bleeping. Except he didn't say bleeping. Oh, no, I'm well aware of how he talks and, his colorful language. But he just, every time he talks, it's like, here's your bleeping alien. Here's your bleeping UFO. Somebody's, this bleeping guy, another bleeping guy remembers, or this blankety blank. I love the comedy aspects of this episode. We get a crazy dude who actually was the guy working on the power lines from the very beginning of the episode, who apparently saw what was happening, and he himself had experiences with the aliens, but he also wrote everything down in perfect screenplay format. When was the first time you ever heard of the Men in Black?
Probably the Will Smith, Tommy Lee Jones film. Like I know it's also it's a Marvel comic that came out, before that as well. But like the first time I would remember was like the phenomenon of Will Smith, Tommy Lee Jones, Men in Black.
Okay, so I just learned something. I did not know it was a comic book before it was a movie.
Yeah.
Um, I can kind of see that now with the fantastical aliens and weapons they have. I can. That makes a lot more sense now. This takes me back to Unsolved Mysteries. It was the first time I heard about the Men in Black. But the Men in Black, for anybody who doesn't know, ever since with UFOs, people have been seeing UFOs, and even going back to people's experience with the Mothman in West Virginia. Apparently, after these things happened, there have been people who have come around who have been reported to be FBI agents or non-human creatures who have skin to be dressed like a human. They don't speak very well. Like people, there's always something very off about them. Who have come to threaten people and tell them, about what they've seen and what they didn't see, try and get them to change their story, so on and so forth. We've got different experiences with the Men in Black in this episode. Our guy who wrote the screenplay, our guy from the Power Lines, saw Jesse the Body Ventura, former Navy SEAL, governor of Minnesota, and professional wrestler. The writer of this episode, Darin Morgan, is a big wrestling fan, and he wrote that specifically for Jesse Ventura. It takes him a while to show the other Men in Black. We get our UFO nut, who experiences the Men in Black. But the first time is when he sees Mulder and Scully come up to a scene. He talks about how because Mulder, David Duchovny's like 6'2" or 6'3". He's a fairly tall individual. I think Gillian Anderson's like 5'3". So there is a distinctive height difference between the two. They talked about how Mulder comes up and he's really tall. And I love the little shriek he makes where when he sees the alien body for the first time, he's ah! And the most hilarious thing to me is he's like, but there was another one. And her hair, she had red hair, but it was too red. And then apparently she threatens the hell out of him. And it's just trying to see little Gillian Anderson threaten somebody like that is just hilarious to me. I'm sorry. I just can't do it. I can't really get into the story and do it justice because then there's Air Force pilots in the small town and there's conspiracies, and apparently the teenagers were hypnotized several times and changed their story each time from being abducted by aliens to being raped to then being captured by Air Force people. And then one of the they capture this alien body, which is actually a dude in an alien suit. And apparently he tells Mulder that the government has been taking people and because they see top secret stuff and they hypnotize them and tell them that they're not, what they didn't see and so on and so forth. Mulder. So quick fact, Mulder kind of goes into this. And Jose Chung talks about Mulder. He talked to the cook in that diner where Mulder was talking to an Air Force pilot. Apparently, Mulder went into that diner and ate an entire sweet potato pie piece by piece, asking the cook a bunch of questions. That's also a callback to David Lynch in Twin Peaks, where Mulder actually played a transgender FBI agent, if I'm not mistaken, in Twin Peaks, in an episode or two of Twin Peaks. So
it says he was in 3 episodes, but I don't know what his role. I mean, as a cop, I just don't know the rest of it because I haven't watched Twin Peaks yet. So.
I haven't either, but I've seen screenshots, and it's like David Duchovny in a dress and a wig, and so
that makes sense because it says his character name was Denise, and I was like, oh, I wonder if that's like pronounced differently for it to be a guy. But no, okay, that would make sense.
I've never watched Twin Peaks. I might watch it. I know we did recently just lose the guy who made Twin Peaks.
Yeah,
David Lynch. So, Mulder eventually goes back to Scully's hotel room. The Men in Black are rifling through all her stuff, and this whole scene is great for me because he's like, "Where's Scully? She went to get some ice." And you're like, oh man, they got Scully. And then she walks in with an ice bucket. She's like, oh, these guys want to talk to you. And then it's my favorite part where, Jesse Ventura and Mulder have their conversation back and forth about conspiracies and things, blah, blah, blah. And then the other man in black puts his hand on Mulder's shoulder and he looks over at him and it's actually Alex Trebek. Like, they didn't get like an Alex Trebek impersonator. They got the legitimate 100% Canadian man that he is, the national treasure, the international treasure that he was, Alex Trebek. And that's where we get the thing of, it was Alex Trebek, the game show host? He's not saying it was.
Right. It just
He's saying
looks
it
like
looked a lot like Alex Trebek. For 30 years, I've remembered that scene, and it's probably my favorite scene in all of the X-Files history. Eventually, because Mulder initially did not want to talk to the author, Jose Chung, he finally goes to talk to him. He's asking him not to write this book because Mulder does believe that the government is taking people and putting propaganda out there about what they've seen and haven't seen. Once again, it's a very convoluted story. If I tried to explain it or make sense of it, we'd be here for like another 30 minutes. I don't think anybody wants that, right? And, one thing we get throughout the entire show is several instances of, how the hell am I supposed to know? And Mulder ends with that, like, so Mulder, like, you can help me by telling me what happened to these kids. How the hell am I supposed to know? And we end with Scully reading Jose Chung's book titled From Outer Space, and him narrating what he wrote in the end of the book. We also get to see so anybody who's watched it and knows this is kind of a double play because you see Mulder in bed watching something with a remote control in hand, and this kind of goes back to what I talked about a few minutes ago, where people who've watched this and know his proclivities were kind of wondering what he was watching, and then it cuts to, it's actually the Patterson Gimli film of the Bigfoot sighting in Northern California from like the 60s. What he's doing watching that shirtless in bed, I don't know. Don't want to know. It's his own man's private time. Not my place to judge, right? So let's go some other notes. Like I said, Darin Morgan was a big wrestling fan. He wrote the part strictly for Jesse Ventura. At one point, Man in Black, Jesse Ventura states, your president, James Earl Carter, had apparently seen a UFO, and it was actually the planet Venus. This is actually true. He really did file a UFO sighting report from 1969. The investigation showed that he probably had just seen the planet Venus. Who's to say if that's accurate or not? We don't know. Johnny Cash, who had the nickname the Man in Black, was considered for that role. That went to Alex Trebek, but I don't know if they couldn't get him or they just figured it'd be funnier too.
It would have been great if it was Johnny Cash, just because that nickname. Like, I think that would have worked really well if they could have got him.
that could have worked on other levels too. Of like Johnny Cash. I'm not saying it was Johnny Cash. It's just the guy who looked a lot like Johnny Cash. The thing is, and I'm not saying, I don't know how many people really would have recognized it. Because this was a big hit with people, like I said, this was a big hit with people who were online. This was a big hit in people in that target demographic of like 18 to 34, right? Not saying they're not Johnny Cash fans, but I'm not sure if they totally would have recognized Johnny Cash. But at the time this aired in 95 or 96 or whatever, how many of us were watching Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune every single night? Right? We knew who Alex Trebek was. So it could have worked, but it may not have been as big of a hit. But it definitely could have been something as well. Blaine Faulkner, the UFO nut there, when he's telling his story to Jose Chung, he describes Scully as a man in black who's disguised as a woman but wasn't pulling it off. Like her hair was red, but it was a little too red. This was an inside joke. based on something I said earlier, to play on the fact that Gillian Anderson is not a natural redhead. She dyed her hair red for the role of Dana Scully. So this was more of a comedy episode. Also, once again, Monster of the Week, not involving the mythology so much. What did you think of this whole aspect of stories from different tales and Alex Trebek is a man in black and all this other weird things that happened in this episode?
I think it took me a bit to get into it because of I didn't realize this one was going to be more overtly comedic. And after the first two episodes I'd seen, I was like thrown initially. Um, a little bummed we don't actually get like answers, I guess, right? Like with what um like the fact that even like Mulder's point of view from the cafe is put in doubt, right? Um, is a little like, what should I believe? But I think that was kind of their ultimate goal in the episode anyway, so I can't really fault it for that too much. But I really liked Jose Chung. I thought that the actor that played him was really cool, really good in the role.
Yeah, so sometimes some of the episodes don't always have like a definitive ending or like we know what happened. There's a couple that don't. This is one of them. But the main purpose of this was just kind of give a comedy episode. Also, this was back when they were doing like 24, 25 episodes a season, right? That's a lot to write for a series, you know, in one season. Kind of miss those days, I'm not going to lie. But at the same time, like I said, it's a lot to write. So sometimes, you know, you have to, especially you got to do some Monster of the Week, some weird stuff. You got to kind of throw some stuff out. This is one of my favorite episodes. I think I've said that a lot. So I love the X-Files. I always have. Like I said, I'm in the middle of a season of rewatch right now. I'm determined I'm going to finish it this time. So I'm in the middle of season 3. I'm actually on the episode right after this episode, Jose Chung from Outerspace. Is the next episode I watched. I'm so into it, as a matter of fact. I bought an X-Files book maybe about a month ago. So, not sure if you can see this. Okay. I probably can't see it well. But anyway, it's a hardcover book that I have. It's called the X-Files Official Archives. This is volume 1. It deals with cryptids, biological anomalies, and parapsychic phenomena. What this book is it's made up to be as if it's an actual FBI file, right? And as you look through it, it's on different cases that they have gone through in the show. Cryptids and various other things. And these are meant to be actual quote unquote notes in the actual quote unquote FBI files that they would have filed when they got back. So it's like photocopies of stuff. And like I said, you can't really see it that well, and that's unfortunate.
Some redacted stuff in there.
Yeah, there's redacted stuff. There's like sticky notes on, or what is meant to be sticky notes on some of the pages. Stuff that they would have used as far as like press clippings, because remember, each of these episodes take place in different towns. So for a lot of the stuff, they might have used newspaper articles and different things like that. So this is just, it's something I really love. It is something I'm glad I bought. And apparently the author is coming out with a volume 2 in the next year or so that's going to deal with all the alien phenomena and the outer space things that deals with it, that the show deals with. So like I said, there's it's a Monster of the Week mainly. They've done some really great episodes. They did one, like I said, with this character called Fluke Man about basically a man-sized flatworm. They deal with vampires. They deal with werewolves. The Jersey Devil, which is an actual quote unquote actual cryptid from New Jersey. You might have heard of it in your neck of the woods where you live. being up there in Maryland,
I've heard of the
close to the.
hockey team.
No, well, the hockey team is based off of the cryptid. It's mainly based in the Pine Barrens up there in New Jersey.
Okay.
So, um, obviously UFO stuff. Uh, there's one episode that Fox would not show on network television after it aired the first time for about 20 years that dealt with an incestuous family called Home. It's probably one of the scariest episodes of the show.
Mm.
It's another really good episode, really highly rated. They do an episode with Michael McKean where he switches bodies with Mulder. They do an episode with a time loop day. There's an episode where there's like a bank robbery and it's a time loop and they keep redoing it. But Mulder and Scully don't know they're in a time loop. It's one of the robbers or someone who's involved with the robbery that knows they're in a time loop. But somehow they have to get Mulder and Scully to help them because they go to the scene and everything else. And eventually they get themselves out. They did an episode kind of based on The Thing, the Stephen King movie.
Mm-hmm.
Or is it Stephen King or John Carter? I don't know. But the
I
Kurt
think
Russell
Carter,
movie,
yeah.
The Kurt Russell movie, The Thing, they do an episode based on that. That's really good. I think I talked about this before. The Final Destination franchise, the first film was supposed to be an X-Files episode about what happens if you escape death and then death comes hunting for you because everybody except Dana Scully dies. Like, nobody's immortal. Everyone dies except Dana Scully. So I don't know if that was the episode in particular or if it was something else. But the writers who made Final Destination were initially making an episode for the X-Files, and then it developed into the movie Final Destination, which developed into a franchise, which I just saw a couple days ago, the trailer for the new one is supposed to come out here in the next couple months, I think. It's coming out here soon. So I'm really looking forward to that. They've also done some stinkers. There's a horrible episode about cats that most of the cast and crew really hate, especially like Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny. That's one of the worst episodes. They did one about going out into outer space and somebody brought something home with them. I don't know. It's another not really good rated episode. But they have some misses in there, but they have some really great ones. For me, it's one of my all-time favorite series. I try to show some of the best that the show had to offer to you. But the show itself for me is a 5 out of 5. What say you?
Okay, so I've kind of done. I have 3 ratings for the 3 episodes, right? So we have episode 1, which was the pilot. I put as a drum roll 4 out of 5. I have the pilot as a 4 out of 5. The second episode that we talked about, Clyde Bruckman's episode, I put as a 5 out of 5. So very good episode. This one, the last one we just talked about, Jose Chung's, I'm putting at 3.5 out of 5 is what I have.
So. I had 3 for that one. I figured that probably was your least favorite of the episodes.
Yeah, and I think again it was just kind of like so different compared to what I had just seen that I was kind of, for some people different is good in the sense of like if you've had, you've watched 2 seasons and you're almost done season 3 and you're like, oh, finally a different type of episode. It can be good. And it still was good. 3.5 out of 5 is a good score. It's just not as good as what those other 2 were for me. So that's where I'd put those. Overall, I mean, look, this is a show I've kind of always had on a list of like maybe I should dive in sometime. I don't know if I want to make the full commitment still because you answered a question for me kind of.
What's that?
Okay, so I asked you, I said, does this actually have an ending? Because there's been 2 revival seasons, 2 movies, and this. Like, does the mythology have an ending enough where I would be able to be satisfied for like the mythos episodes, or is it
To be honest, I don't know.
okay?
I haven't seen fully the last
Two
season.
seasons? Oh, the last season. Okay.
I saw most of the second to last season when they came back in 2016. I haven't got around to watching the 2018 season, mainly because that was around the time I started working at the post office and things were crazy.
Yeah.
Like I just haven't had a chance to really. And I'm not going to jump into them now. Like I'm going to work my way up.
Right. Right.
So I got to be honest. I don't know. Now, the one thing I'll say. Let me ask you this: you enjoyed your experience with Lost, correct?
Huh? I enjoyed it. Yes. Yeah.
Did it end satisfyingly enough for you?
Lost.
Because
Yeah.
that's a very divisive show for some people
Mm-hmm.
as far as how it ended, right? Some people do like I haven't finished it. That's another one for me. I need to. I think I went up to like season 3 or 4 at one point, and then life got in the way. So if I'm going to do it, I got to start all over again,
Right.
right?
Right.
But I know that's a very divisive thing as far as like the last season or so, and then how it ended. Some people enjoy the ending. Some people who are really fans of it are like, "What are we doing here?" Like,
Some people also didn't understand the ending. I cannot tell you how many times. I don't mean that in like the snooty way that people do when like people don't like stuff and you're like, well, you just didn't understand it. Like it's some groundbreaking thing. But I mean, there are literal people out there who say the ending is this and it's not, right? And it's been like, and in the episode itself, it tells you this has all happened. So like if you ever hear, not to, this won't spoil anything for you, but there's a lot of people out there who think the ending of Lost is they were dead the whole time. That is not the ending of Lost. So if you hear anybody say that, they fundamentally did not understand the end. And even they have a character who says in the finale, everything that has happened was real and has happened, like along those words. But people still misunderstood that ending, partly because of a choice ABC made as well that confused people over the credits. But I was very satisfied with the ending of Lost, and there's not a lot of shows that I have been not satisfied by with the ending. Like, okay, I think Fringe has a really great ending. Have you seen Fringe at all?
no, that was one of those I meant to watch, and same thing. I just never got around to it.
This it would be up your alley if you like the X Files. I would say. Fringe had a good ending. Lost had a good ending to me. Dark, 12 Monkeys, all those shows have really good endings for me.
Let me
Um,
ask you this: with with everything that happened throughout all of Lost, and like I said, I only
mhm.
made up to like season 3 or 4. I don't know what happened after that, but I know. But as far as like the whole thing with the did they answer did they answer all the questions? Do you feel as though they answered all the questions that people had about certain things, like the smoke monster and various
Yes.
other things? Like were those, at least to your satisfaction, were those questions answered satisfactorily enough?
Yes, for me it was. And they did answer, I think, quite a bit. I think it gets a little bit too much hate by like there are definitely a lot of people that say they didn't answer enough. But when you actually press them for like what did they not answer, um they either come up with stuff that does have answers, like the polar bear. People will tell you that the polar bear is not answered. It's answered like 3 or 4 times in the show. But there are, I would say, more questions were answered than were left unanswered. In my experience.
So I'll say this: I don't know the full story. Like I said, I haven't seen it all, but I will say they may not totally be able to answer it because it involves like it's it's a massive government conspiracy. So you may not be able to totally get a fulfilling answer. You know what I'm saying? Based on that. You may not. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just I would be really curious because it's like when you come back, obviously when they come back, they're probably also thinking, well, we might go a couple more years, right? but you're also
They
thinking now's the time to wrap anything up if you didn't wrap it up before,
well,
like
they're talking about doing another revival again. Um,
I
this
was just
time
reading
with
without the main two, right?
uh, they might be involved a little bit, but like I guess part of the story is at some point Mulder and Scully do get together, and because they've been chased by government shadowy figures, they're off on their own, right? They're not doing the X-Files anymore. But I guess the FBI would still have the X-Files, like it would for unexplained stuff. So at some point they might have to put people there. So it could be, a situation of new agents taking over the X Files itself. Like
Right.
not necessarily not in a way of like, oh, the previous 12 seasons or whatever didn't happen, but like, hey, they have to open it back up for whatever reason. But now, you know, it's just a new set of people and modernize it up.
Have you ever watched the spin-offs? Because there's two, right? Have you ever watched Millennium or The Lone Gunman?
I watched a little bit of the Lone Gunman. Do you know the weird thing that happened with the Lone Gunman?
I may have heard it. What's the weird thing?
I think the pilot episode, or yeah, I want to say the pilot episode had something like terrorists crashing a plane into the World Trade Center.
Oh, yep. Yep, I
Like,
just looked
I
it
mean,
up.
and this was well before 9/11. This
It
was
was
like
March
98, 99.
No, this is March 4th of 2001. Very like what, 6 months
Yeah.
before. That's crazy.
So, um, and I'll be honest, the Lone Gunmen were great characters, and they're great characters in the world of the X Files. I don't know if they're the kind of characters that really need their own show.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? But fitting in, helping Mulder, doing things with Mulder, they do fit well. Oh, also in the last episode, Jose Chunks from Outer Space. Did you notice anybody familiar
Uh no. I mean other than Alex Trebek?
from a previous episode?
Oh yeah, yeah, Yappy was back, right?
Yeah, the Pendish Yappy was narrating an alien autopsy video.
Yeah, so
I didn't read.
I was wondering like does he show up more or is it just those two times cuz that was
I think it's
interesting.
just those two. I didn't realize it until I watched these episodes that I'd given you that these episodes had Yappy in them.
See, I thought
Um,
that was a choice by you.
no, that was not a distinct choice. It was just because those were great episodes. But also, that was a play off of because Fox during that time did have a really crappy alien autopsies like fact or fiction TV
Yeah, I was
show.
just reading it on here. This hoax thing that turned out to be a hoax.
So, would you at some point continue and pick up?
Well, I'd probably start at episode 2, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, and go back. Yeah, I think I might. So there's a few shows. Look, I'll also say this for the podcast because we haven't really done an episode I think since I've done this, but I did launch another new podcast, of course, because I can't help myself. But also, by the time this premieres, this will be out there, I think. But we're fusing like over on the other podcasts I do a DC podcast, Marvel podcast, Star Wars podcast, and a fantasy podcast. We're fusing those into one called Soups and Sabers, which we'll discuss all those things still in individual episodes, so that way you're not listening to like a DC thing, and if you don't like Marvel, you're not like fast forwarding through the Marvel part. There'd still be very distinct episodes. That was something I really wanted to still keep with that because I do not listen to a lot of podcasts that discuss all nerd things in one episode because let's say they're talking uh, something I don't like. I don't want to have to worry about stopping the episode or skipping the 30
yeah.
seconds ahead the whole time. So I wanted to keep that stuff kind of distinct. But then with that now, I feel like I have some more freed up podcasting space. So I did a new podcast called Top TV, which is where I am going to be talking about the original plan was like prestige television, like Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, Severance, just like the golden age of TV and like any new TV shows that are very well regarded. But I think I might open that up a bit, and I was thinking maybe I could do stuff like Twin Peaks and X Files or stuff over on that podcast if I wanted to discuss um, other stuff on it after I'm done Severance season 2, and which is what I started with over there. So that's kind of, if I do, I might either do like reactions on the channel or do like episodes discussing what I've watched through or something like that. So if I do, I have other shows I'm watching right now that I'm trying to maybe line up some stuff, but I think I might get around to it eventually.
I still like my theme song idea for that podcast.
Yes, we'll do it. I was gonna talk to you a little bit off air here afterwards and kind of figure out how we can do that. So stay tuned, people. You might hear good theme song discussions on television shows if you check out Top TV. Okay.
So what do we have next?
I am a bad host. Let me go to stats because I still haven't picked the movie for next week.
I was gonna say, do we have any stats or memes or anything? Oh, before you do that, so I was going to pick another Nicolas. Before I picked the X-Files, I was going to pick another Nicolas Cage movie. I was gonna do his last one, that trilogy. I was gonna do Con Air, but then I had to stop myself because, and I just watched this. It came up in my YouTube feed like last night. You remember the episode of Community where Abed watched way too many Nicolas Cage movies?
Yeah.
And then flipped out in class? Like, when I chose to do the X-Files instead of that third Nicolas Cage movie in a row, that's exactly why I chose the X-Files, because I'm like, no, that's way too much Nicolas Cage in too short of a period of time. And I'm like, one of us will end up like Abed, where we'll just end up going nuts. I'm a cat. And just all that other stuff. And I was like, yeah, we got to spread the cage out. So what do we got for stats and things?
Yeah, so I'll have to figure out how I'm going to add some of these TV shows to stats. But we do have, this is our third TV show we've covered. We covered Buffy, the Vampire Slayer, which might be getting a revival / reboot with Sarah Michelle Gellar returning for like a side role, or like not the main Slayer. It sounds like it would follow a different Slayer, but Buffy, we talked about. We did The Office, and we've now done X-Files. That's 3 shows that we have now done here. And I'm adding +1 to franchise. X-Files is a franchise. It's spun off TV shows. It has movies. Yeah. It has games. It has comics. Like you said, it has books. That's a franchise to me. So we have now marked off our 17th franchise that we've dealt with here on the podcast. The other ones being Lord of the Rings, Terminator, Star Wars, Ghostbusters, Marvel, DC, Gladiator, because that has a sequel now. Austin Powers.
There might actually even be a third one in the works for Gladiator.
Yeah, they were talking about it. Spaceballs, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, True Lies, Airplane, Ferris Bueller, Buffy, Grease, James Bond, and X-Files. So those are the franchises we've dealt with. And I guess I'll be adding, because we did this for Eliza Dushku. She's been in 2 projects, one of them being a movie, one of them being a TV show. We will put this as David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson being, one project, one TV show. Not going to count episode counts to them here, but
yeah.
Yeah, so if he appears in something else, he'll be added as like a movie, or same thing with her. And I was able to add their alphabet. So we have F, right? Fox Mulder for Mulder. I went by first name, as I usually do, X-Files. And Dana Scully. So we now have 4 D's and 5 F's that we've dealt with. Still missing a few letters like I, Q, U, XYZ. So we'll figure out if any projects can mark those off for us anytime soon. I didn't know if I wanted to go with another Bond one. I feel like we should maybe space those out a bit. Because it's 5 of them, that would be like almost half of my picks by the end of the season. So I do want to maybe switch on, especially since those are not like currently still available on streaming. I'd like for some people that are watching to maybe be able to follow along. So let's see what I can pick here for what I would want to introduce to you this time. Let's see. You have Prime Video?
Yes.
And you haven't seen Horrible Bosses?
I have not.
We're going to do Horrible Bosses. We're going to do a comedy. It's been a bit since I picked a comedy. So I think that's what we're going to see next time. That's Jason Bateman, Jason Sudeikis, Charlie Day, Kevin Spacey, Jennifer Aniston. Am I missing somebody on that list there? Colin Farrell. So pretty stacked cast. It's one of my favorite comedies in recent times. So we'll check out Horrible Bosses. That's on Prime Video.
Alrighty.
All right. Well, that about wraps us up here on Films for the Very First Time. Thank you all for checking the X-Files out with us if it's your first time watching the X-Files, or if you're like Casey and it's one of your favorite shows and you are just revisiting these 3 episodes. But good job picking the episodes. I felt like I was able to follow along pretty well with these. So it was good. Hopefully if people are watching along with us and they are seeing these for the first time, they felt the same way. All of our social media links are in the description below on the YouTube or in your podcast notes if you're on your podcast app. Thank you all for watching and listening. We'll catch you next time when we talk Horrible Bosses.